welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about Ecuador. Ecuador was my very first international trip ever. I learned a lot. There were a lot of near misses and like things that I would probably do differently, but also like a lot of really cool opportunities for growth and like learning more about myself and figuring things out. And I think Ecuador is a really good first kind of solo travel destination for women for a couple like random kind of logistic reasons that I'll get into a little bit later. Ecuador also though can be a little bit tricky. Like there were times when I didn't necessarily feel super safe. So I'll get into all of that as well as hopefully give you some trip inspiration for your future travels. As always, this is like my own experience. So if it's different than yours and your experience in Ecuador, that's just kind of the reality of how it is sometimes. But I will say I absolutely loved Ecuador. I thought that the people were amazing, the food was fun, the culture was great. And I think that if you follow some of my tips, you will have an amazing trip as well. Okay, so a couple quick logistics. I spent most of my time in Ecuador in the Quito area, and I did a couple different kind of day trips. I went to see Cotopaxi, I went to see one of the really beautiful lakes around there, and then I went to the Galapagos. And my experience as a solo female traveler was really different in those two regions. I'll get more into this, but in Quito, I didn't necessarily feel super safe. I was with like guides most of the time, and I probably wouldn't have gone out in the city by myself. In the Galapagos, though, I felt super safe. The towns in the Galapagos are like really small, and it was like safety was not an issue at all. I was out by myself after dark like semi-frequently, and I never had a single negative encounter. So where you go in Ecuador will likely impact your experience and how comfortable you feel as a solo female traveler. Those are just my experiences in two of the more popular places. Okay, and that leads me into my very first tip, and that is if you're a solo female traveler, anywhere, but maybe in Ecuador especially, avoid being out after dark. Like I said earlier, like it kind of depends on where you are, and you'll pretty quickly get like a vibe for how comfortable you feel in a place. So I had read some stuff online that Quito is maybe not the safest place for a solo gal to be after dark. So I like never really tried it. And then when I was out and about during the day, I did kind of get the vibe. It's like, okay, I feel safe right now, but I probably won't go like out to a bar or out drinking. If nightlife is like a big thing for you, you can definitely like go to a hostel that has like a kind of a bar crawl. The hostel that I stayed at, every single night at like 10 p.m. had like a bar crawl where like a bus would take you around to different bars, and you'd be with a group, so that would probably be much safer. But if you're just by yourself, I personally would avoid staying out after dark. If it is in a place where you feel a little bit safer, like the Galapagos, that would be kind of a different story. Going along with that, I also, in general, no matter what the region is, don't recommend drinking. If you're a solo female traveler, I think drinking just like impairs ambitions. And like for me personally, I was still able to have a really good time and explore and like see all that I wanted to see in Ecuador without alcohol. Okay, my next tip for solo travel Ecuador is to stay in a place where you feel really, really safe. If you get bad vibes from a place, leave immediately. I really like hostels for this because hostels are kind of like a cheaper hotel. Like there will be someone there if you feel unsafe that's designed to help you. I stayed when I was in Quito at the Secret Garden Hostel. If you've done any research, you've probably encountered it. It's very, very famous. And it was basically the best hostel experience that I have ever had. The rooms were clean, everyone was nice, very friendly. I felt super safe. It was in a good part of town. It has a built-in restaurant and a built-in bar. So there were a couple times where I got back from tours a little bit late, and I didn't have to worry about the logistics of like going out and navigating after dark because where I live had a restaurant. So that was very handy. Even if you don't want to necessarily stay at a hostel, there's a wide variety of hotels in the region. If you're staying by yourself, I would not discourage, but be wary of places like Airbnbs or Verbos. Because if you stay in a hotel or a hostel, there's usually like a front desk man. And I always feel a little bit safer when they have that. And if you're in an Airbnb, like it's just you and the host, and sometimes you might not want to necessarily let them know that you're traveling by yourself. So it's all personal preference, but just some things to consider that if you were in a group, you might not have to consider, but if it's just you, just like things to keep in mind. But definitely recommend the Secret Garden hostel in Ecuador, and recommend like staying in a place where you feel truly safe and okay. Okay, my next piece of safety advice is to join tours. Even if you're traveling by yourself, tours kind of have like a bunch of different advantages. The first is their safety in numbers. Like, you'll be with a group, there'll be people that are responsible for keeping you safe, and a lot of the logistics like driving in Ecuador and like knowing which like places to stop at can be eliminated with the help of a tour. They're a little bit more expensive, but I still found them to be very, very manageable. I went on, oh my goodness, a bunch of different tours. That day tours in Ecuador were like my thing. I went on like 3 or 4 in the Galapagos. I went on, I think 2 or 3 when I was based out of Quito. So I really recommend tours. They were great. Just make sure you bring enough money to tip your guide. Oh, and that's another thing. I'll pause right here to say this. Ecuador is a great place for solo female travel if you're from the US, because they take the American dollar. Like, their currency is the US dollar. So it's really easy to like get money, and you can avoid like credit card, foreign fee transactions. So I highly recommend that. Money is a small thing, like money management with different currencies in different countries. But because I was by myself and because like I had to manage everything else, it was really nice that the money was like so simple to do. And I was able to acquire the money before I left the US, so that I didn't have to like right when I got to the Quito airport, like go to an ATM. So just a small shout out to Ecuador for being extra kind and helpful for us US-based solo travel girls. Okay, my final safety tip for solo travel Ecuador is to don't look approachable. Okay, it sounds kind of intense, but it really does work. Like, if you are walking on the street and you are walking with a purpose and you just look like you know where you're going, it's going to give off this air of like, don't talk to me. And it's probably, you know, maybe gonna discourage some friendly faces, but it's also gonna discourage people that like maybe don't have the best interest or intentions in mind, and kind of like have them stay to themselves a little bit. I really recommend just like walking with confidence and like knowing where you're going, and not really giving people a reason necessarily to reach out and talk to you. This has worked wonders with me on solo travels. Even if I have no idea where I'm going, like walking with a slight frown and walking with purpose in the direction that I think I'm supposed to be going, like, really does help. So I recommend that as well. So now I have 2 just kind of general like tips for solo travel. These don't really necessarily apply just to Ecuador, but are ones that I found to be really helpful. The first is to bring a book for meals. So I love being by myself. Like, I really do love just getting to do my own thing and do what I want to do when I want to do it. But meals were actually like a little bit harder than I thought they would be, which is kind of weird because I dine solo in the US all the time. But my recommendation for that is to bring a book. Bringing a book kind of eliminates the like awkward staring around, and there's something for you to do. I quickly found that when I had a book, I kind of like got out of my own head and kind of got out of the mindset of like, oh my goodness, everyone's staring at me. So I would definitely recommend that. My other piece of advice is, in places where you feel comfortable, like on tours or at your hostel, be as friendly as possible. Even if you're introverted, don't necessarily like go out of your way or like do something that you're uncomfortable with, but there's a lot of like really cool people out there in the world. Like, I'm making this video, but obviously the majority of people I think in the world are good, not necessarily bad. And solo travel offers you a unique opportunity because you are a lot more approachable. Like, you will talk to way more people when you're traveling by yourself versus if you're traveling in a group or with a partner or even with like one other person. So I definitely recommend putting yourself out there. In general, a solo traveler will always appreciate like a hi or how's it going. And it can just be like a really good opportunity to make a new friend. I think about the people that I met in Ecuador all the time. Like, I heard the absolute wildest and most epic stories. And obviously if they're traveling and they're staying in like hostels or hotels, they have similar priorities to you, and it can just be a great spot to network. Even though I was on the trip by myself, like, found myself being the most social that I have ever been. So that was really a vibe, and I think that human connection is important. So if at all possible for you, I would definitely recommend getting out there. So overall, I felt pretty safe on my trip to Ecuador. I also didn't put myself in any situation where I wouldn't be unsafe. I like really was diligent about getting back before dark, staying in the hostel, not drinking, not giving people a reason to come up to me necessarily, and all of those things. So if you are a solo woman and you're thinking about going to Ecuador, I definitely recommend it. It is definitely a don't necessarily put your guard down type of place, but I also think the US is a don't necessarily put your guard down type of place. All that to say, I absolutely loved it. If you are thinking about going to Ecuador, I cannot recommend it enough. It is a beautiful, stunning, amazing, spectacular country full of very, very kind people. So I cannot recommend it enough. Thank you so much for watching to this end of this video, and I will be back next week.